The story that I'm going to tell you guys today involves the phenomenon of being a Watchtower company man. My grandpa had gone through so many different things being a Jehovah's Witness, things that really make you shake your head and you don't understand, because you're learning all these things that are in the Bible and the Watchtower. You want to do what is Christian and what is right according to Christian standards. But then what happens is you're being written off. You end up being the bad guy. We see this happening so often when abuse is being reported, that the people who report the abuse, that it happened to the victims, are all being written off as the bad guy. And part of the reason, and I am so thankful to JT from the Critical Thinkers, Exjw, he really helped me understand that it involves being company men. And I just think my grandpa was not a company man. And when you hear the story, you will understand. And I will explain more about being a company man versus being a spiritual man. So here's today's story. So I was thinking this morning that over the years, there has been so many stories at different congregations that were just not quite right, where you really see the lacking of love that we proclaim that we have more than other people, but also that really should have woken us up. But I think we always just blame the individuals and not the organization as a whole. But there was one story in particular I was just thinking about, and I wanted to share it with you guys because especially my grandpa, who was an elder, he has seen so many things, especially moving across continents and different places that did not harmonize, that really did shake us a little bit. And I remember my aunt saying growing up all the time, "This is just not right." I have that sentence in my head so much. This is just not right. Because you know what? It wasn't right. Why did it not wake us up already? So this particular story pertains to my grandpa and my aunt. We'll call her Aunt Rita. But they were in a decent sized city and actually a really kind of a nice congregation at first. We thought it was nice. They were happy that they had found, this congregation did a lot of things. They would have softball on Sundays, and they did a lot of things with each other. And so there was a pioneer sister who had a teenage daughter, and the teenage daughter was typical teenager, stoic, a little bit intimidating in her mood, I would say, grumpy. And I guess she didn't want to study with her pioneer mom. The dad was worldly, but she did say that she would study with someone, and no one in the congregation wanted to study with this girl. And so my aunt, who we'll talk about a little bit later, she said, "Yeah, it's okay. I'll study with her. It doesn't matter." Because she's kind of outgoing and chatty, so she didn't care. She's like, "I'll go on this study." And this study went on for several years because I think the organization's stances cut a study off if it doesn't progress. And my family just didn't believe in that because we felt like, where does it say that? Where does it say if they want to keep learning about the Bible, then we will keep teaching them? So my family just disregarded that. They didn't agree with that. They just felt like everybody has a different pace. And this girl was a teenager. So every week, my aunt would go over to her house, and I was little, my cousin and I, we would tag along sometimes. And I remember the teenage girl, she would have the game Operation out for us. And we were so little, we would play Operation during the study. And that was another good thing about my family. They weren't really that strict with us. I mean, I didn't have to sit as a 6-year-old during this study every week. We could play, they didn't care. And so every week, this study, who we will call Lisa, she had out her Bible, her book, she sat there and she had Kool-Aid on the table, which is really funny if you think about it now, because they drank the Kool-Aid. And my aunt said, I don't care. I'll keep studying with her. I'm just going to keep studying with her. And so she did. And the years went by, and my aunt would read the paragraph, ask the question, answer the paragraph, and that was the study. My aunt did all the talking, and the girl sat there. But, you do kind of bond over the years, and I think that Lisa did like my aunt, where she felt probably like this is a person who cares about me, so she kept studying. So at this point, the study kept going, and Lisa was in college. And one day, Lisa was sitting, and she had an engagement ring on her finger. And my aunt grabbed it, and she said, "You're engaged? Who is this? He's not a brother. Did you meet him at college? Well, if you're dating a worldly guy, we got to see if he's any good. You better bring him to the meeting tomorrow, and let's see if he'll show up to the meeting." It's kind of like how my aunt is, like a little bossy. Very, very bossy. And so, wouldn't you know it, Lisa brought her now fiance to the next meeting. And we'll call him Jack. And he was songbook, Bible, singing along full throttle. Loved it. First meeting. Loved it. Super intelligent man. Very, very intelligent. Also really sweet. He was a really nice guy. And my aunt said, okay, well, look at this guy. That's wild. And so they got him together with my grandpa, and my grandpa started studying with him. And my grandpa was a very interesting man. I talked about this in the previous episode. He was just so educated, read everything he could get his hands on. But he was also so good at presenting things to people. So I think that this type of personality, if he talked to people at the door, they listened to him because he had a way to talk to people. And of course, Jack just took to the study. He really loved it. And then that made Lisa kind of progress a little bit too. And they were planning their wedding. They were, growing together also spiritually. And it was kind of a beautiful thing. It was exciting. I do think that people in the congregation are very jealous about this kind of stuff, though, because really, who's really bringing anyone in anymore these days? It's so hard to have a Bible study. It's so hard to bring anyone in. And really, now that I'm out, I recognize it as recruiting. Who even recruits anyone? But my aunt and my grandpa, they really were so happy for this couple, and this couple was planning to do everything right according to the JW standard. So what they were planning to do is they just became publishers, and they wanted to get baptized together. They went over their questions with the elders, and then they wanted to, after they got baptized, have a Kingdom Hall wedding and reception after that. So they planned this whole JW thing. And I truly think that people in the hall were jealous. I do. And my aunt didn't pioneer. People already kind of looked down at my grandpa because of his very open-minded views on things, and he would call things out that were wrong, and they didn't like that, He wasn't a company man, as JT always says. My grandpa was a godly man from the Bible, but he wasn't a company man, and that is what created his problems. It really did in hindsight. They did not like him. They always had a chip on their shoulders because of this. And so people probably thought like my aunt had taken this study and she didn't quit the study, and suddenly the study is getting baptized, like, and anyone else, like the pioneers probably were like, well, I should have had this study, you know, but whatever. So they went over their baptism questions, Lisa and Jack, and it was so shortly before the wedding they were going to get baptized so they could have their wedding in the Kingdom Hall. And for Jehovah's Witnesses, you cannot have a wedding in the Kingdom Hall unless you're baptized. That's what the society says. However, we all know that if you have ties or connections, that's not always true. Because I sure know that my cousin married her study, who was not baptized, but because he studied with an elder and they wanted to get married, the elder, who was the presiding overseer, totally helped them get married in the Kingdom Hall. So it just depends on who you know. If you're part of the elite, there will be exceptions made. So hypocritical. But for these two, they were not going to get a break on that. They were not going to be able to marry in the Kingdom Hall unless they were baptized. And the elders came back and they said, Jack can get baptized. Lisa doesn't. She didn't turn in her time last month, so we're going to hold off on her. Throwing a wrench into their whole wedding. And I mean, my aunt was furious, and she's kind of a fighter, so she's not going to let this like die down easily. And Lisa, very shy and quiet, was so perplexed because she said, I did turn it in. I know I turned it in. And who knows what happens there. It did seem like it had ill intent. There was definitely not any loving kindness here, because any loving kindness would have been like, oh, some mistake was made, you can get baptized. Like, who would prevent a person to get baptized when they want to get baptized? Especially when the eunuch in the Bible says, what prevents me from getting baptized? He didn't have any time slips he turned in, and then they went and baptized him. Anyone should want to, like, if you're trying to get closer to God by baptism, nothing should stand in your way. This is so, like, just rules. And she said she did turn it in, and I do know of elders who have lost time slips, because my mom is very particular with her time and turning it in when she was PME, person in minded, still going to meetings, and she saw her publisher card, and they just, like, because I think the elder was sloppy and knew it, he just made up numbers. And my mom's like, that was not my time. Like, what are you guys doing, just writing in numbers? Things that make you go, this elder just wrote in some stuff because he forgot your slip. So this definitely does happen. Not forgot his slip, because he lost the slip. And so they prevented Lisa from getting baptized. And that was a whole mess. So now, no wedding in the Kingdom Hall. Everything needs to be changed. Just a mess. And how embarrassing when this is your study, too. Like, you're trying to lead these people to what you believe is the truth, and it all gets so messed up. I mean, how embarrassing, right? I honestly can't even believe that Jack actually still got baptized eventually. It was after their wedding. He didn't want to get baptized without his wife, and so he waited, but I can't believe he actually still joined. Like, that's so sad. It's so sad. But what my grandpa noticed was that the love that Jack had at first for the truth. We're going to, like, see this whole story from a Jehovah's Witness perspective. But from a Jehovah's Witness perspective, Jack had this exciting new love for the truth. And that was definitely gone. And it was so sad to see for my grandpa, because his study, who was just coming in, it was like a son to him, now was being, like, crushed. So new to the whole organization. And he lost, like, the love that he had at first. So anyways, time goes on, and Jack, computer guy, starts working for an elder who was very wealthy and had a company that employed, like, a bunch of other elders, a bunch of other J-dubs, just very, very like, wealthy people, J-dubs. And Jack was still studying with my grandpa, because what the J-dubs do is after you get baptized, you still can study, I think, the God is Love book afterwards. So they were still seeing each other and enjoying their study. And that was probably a big reason why Jack still got baptized and stayed, because of my grandpa saying, ignore what people do. We're doing this for Jehovah. And so he got a taste of that real early. And Jack, working for this company now, sees stuff that doesn't align. You're saying you're witnesses, you're saying you're elders, you're taking the lead, but you're not acting this way. And so he was fixing people's computers, and he went to my grandpa and he said, they all have porn on their computers. Every single one of them. All the elders, they all have porn. And my grandpa, how embarrassing is that? When you just don't even, just how embarrassing. My grandpa took all of this really seriously. He was really a true, he wanted to do things right, so they went and talked to the elders, which is kind of difficult when everyone's related. They're all related to the wealthy elder. And so they're trying to okay, something's up. And basically what this elder said, because they're all in cahoots with each other, it was such nepotism. It said, why is he meddling in other people's affairs? And my grandpa's like, no, we're supposed to, and take it for however it is. Now that we're out, it's easy to say, oh, why do you have to report on everything? But when you're a Jehovah's Witness, or really any cult, it gets ingrained in you that you go tell on people, because you're not helping them spiritually. You're preventing them from being close to Jehovah. If you see something that is serious wrongdoing and you're not talking out, you're blood guilty. So that is the brainwashing. And so you're very ingrained early on that if you see something, you better talk. And so he felt like this was hypocritical, but also kind of shocking. And the elders basically said, stop meddling, which tells you everything. And then it progresses, and they go at a company outing to Vegas. And all the elders were gambling and drinking, and Jack is baffled. Newly converted man with these elders who are not being J-dubs or elders. It's just the hypocrisy is so disgusting to me, gross. And again, nothing. They all stayed elders, nothing happened. And I do really want to reiterate that Jack is really a good man. He was being taught one way, believed one way. These people are on the podium, and it does shock you when you then see them not acting right. It reminds me so much of Leah Remini. In her book, she talks about how at Tom Cruise's wedding, and all the Scientologists were not acting like Scientologists, and it helped her wake up, because she was running around what is going on here? How are you guys all acting? You're not being Scientologists, you're all acting up, and she was just, when she described it, I understood, because how often, when you're really taking this seriously and you believe it, but you're seeing people, and often it's elders' kids, who are getting away with things, or in this case, the elders themselves, but they're teaching you one thing, are very strict and hardcore with their rules and regulations with other people, but then they go act up. It's disgusting, And this elder, this wealthy elder, ended up taking a job and contracting with the army, making things for the tanks and for this huge church that they were building. It was so huge, they were really calling it Six Flags Over Jesus. And this elder took a contract with that church. The brothers who worked for him had to wear hard hats with a cross on it. And Jack was just what is going on? What is going on? And my grandpa was so offended on so many levels because of, we're out now. All this doesn't matter. You want to take your contract with the church, go right ahead. But if you're in and you're preaching this, again, this is so ridiculous. And my grandpa, he knew there was the sister who had a husband who worked on an army base, and she was getting the paycheck from the army, but she was just a crossing guard for the school on base. And the society said, nope, she can't take a paycheck from the army. She has to find another job, which looked ridiculous to her worldly husband. And then she had to drive off base. It made her life so much harder because she couldn't accept a paycheck from the army. Now here's this elder taking a contract to make parts for a tank, like straight to war, and takes a contract in church wearing hard hats with the cross on it. My grandpa was like, no, you can't make this lowly sister that clearly no one cares about because she's not elite, and she had to give up her job. But these guys, because they're really loaded, they're all friends, they're all related, and they were friends with Garrett Lush, hand-delivered a check to Bethel to him. And also, speaking of Garrett Lush, he would go to this town and people would invite him after his talk for dinner, and he accepted, and then got a better invitation with the rich brothers and canceled his invitation with the poor folks to be with the rich people, with the rich elder. And when we heard that at the time, because the family was kind of upset, the lowly ones, like, they were like, hey, he accepted this and then he canceled to go to a better invitation. Like, disgusting. And it just shows you how the governing body, this has irked me all along. If you're so close to the Holy Spirit and to God, wouldn't you think you would be kind like Jesus more than anyone else? Jesus wanted to be with the regular folks. He didn't want to be with the Pharisees and the elite. He wanted to be with his brother. And how is it that the J-dubs do not see this? How is it that you're preaching how gross it is, how gross the Pharisees are? How come you don't see it yourself that you're so much like this? My mom said when she was little, there was a brother that was from the Anointed, and he was in the concentration camp for many years, and people wanted to treat him prominently. And so he was sitting in the cafeteria during lunch at the assembly when we still had lunch, and some ministerial servant came over and was like, let me carry your tray for you. And the brother said, I can really carry my own tray. And then the ministerial servant said, don't you want to sit over here, with us, basically with the VIPs, with the elite? And the brother who was anointed, he really was so kind and caring. And he says, no, I will sit right here with my brothers and sisters. And my mom, she was so little, she thought, yeah, now this is a guy who is like Jesus. And also, what's up with this other guy? That's disgusting. Do you not get it? Gross. But she recognized that already. But how much do we have that? And one of the things I noticed too is at conventions lately, when they announce a brother, they say, he's been an elder for 7 years and he's pioneered for 3 years. And the first time I heard it, I'm like, that is so messed up. Isn't it don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing, and don't brag, and it should just be all quiet. And even when people on their Instagram have it as their stat, J-Dub, pioneer, elder's wife, I'm like, no, none of that. That is, no, you don't get it. You're doing the opposite of getting it. Even as a J-dub, when I saw that, I'd be like, that is so wrong. This is such a simple thing, but you did not get it. You are not getting it. But as time has gone along, the organization seems to really promote this kind of elite behavior more and more so. And it's so gross. But I will talk about that in another episode, like Pioneer School and everything. I'll talk about that. This really is about Jack and Lisa. So my grandpa, seeing that it was being measured with 2 measuring cups, the poor sister who worked on base versus like the elite. And he doesn't care if someone's elite. He doesn't care if they're friends with Garrett Loesch. Like, my grandpa has a sense of justice. And it's like, if this is the rule, it has to be the rule. And like, how are you going to talk to the elders? They're all in cahoots. They're all related. They're all wealthy. They don't care about this guy who's not a company man. Circuit overseer came along. He's probably getting a green handshake. So he's not really saying anything, staying out of it, not doing anything. And so my grandpa, who has this sense of justice, who is acting on what he's always been taught as a Jehovah's Witness, decides, okay, something needs to be done with, because not only did Jack say something, there was also another brother whose conscience was really bothering him, working for this wealthy elder, taking all these contracts with the army and with the church. And so my grandpa and another elder in the hall, those 2, they were kind of sticking together. And my grandpa said, okay, to the wealthy elder, it's either going to be you write to Bethel and explain the situation and see what they say. Like, I'm going to give you the opportunity to do it yourself. Or I will write to Bethel and see what they say. Just because I think he just really thought it was just so unfair that they were doing things directly against, like, Watchtower policy. And so the wealthy business owner elder did actually write Bethel. I have the letter, and he was like, it's only a small percentage that I'm working for the army, and it's only a small percentage, less than 3% or something like that. And Bethel wrote him back. And Bethel wrote, you know, we have a copy of the letter that Bethel wrote back, and they're like, we basically said that we're not going to get involved, handle it with your local body of elders. Duh, that was the whole problem. The local body of elders was the whole problem. And, you know, it wasn't being handled at all. They all signed the letter. I have all the signature on the letters on the side. And that was it. Wait, aren't we the ones who say, if you have 1 drop of poison and you put it in a glass of water, the whole glass, throw it out, you know? And my grandpa was just stunned. And so my grandpa wrote to Bethel. And I really need to, like, we have this letter still. I got to find it and post it. But the gist of this letter back from Bethel, which, first of all, if you don't know this, Bethel doesn't want you to write to them. They want you to handle everything locally. It's really looked down on if you write to Bethel for some reason. This should make you really wake up. If you write to Bethel and you're questioning things, the answer will not be sent to you. The answer will be sent to your local body of elders along with your letter. So if you're having a problem with the elder body, you just didn't even realize they're not going to write you back. They're going to send your letter and your reply to your elders. So now they're sitting there. They're already mad at you. They're going to hate you now. And you walk into the meeting and you didn't even realize that they have your letter and they're going to pull you, might even call you an apostate. My grandpa, he was an elder for so long, he did know that, and I don't think he really cared. This situation got like such a mess, he didn't care. He just felt like we need like divine interference at this point. And so he wrote to Bethel, and Bethel sent their letter back, and their answer is such a joke. I mean, it did jolt my grandpa. And again, like, how did we not wake up? It's so not from God. It's so clear.
And I have to add something at this point in the story, and that is that the things at the other Kingdom Hall had gotten so bad at that point. Things had gotten so bad, and you feel the soft shunning. They're all old time, rich, wealthy friends, elite, and here comes this brother, and who isn't like going along with everything and is actually caring about things. They didn't like it. So they started treating my grandpa and grandma like really poorly. So my grandpa, who was still an elder at the time, ended up switching congregations. And when he switched congregations, they didn't recommend him as an elder. I have never heard of this, but they made him a ministerial servant until like things settled down or were discussed more. So weird, never heard of it before. And when the letter from Bethel finally was, came back, but now in the new congregation, the letter from Bethel back, the answer had arrived, and they're ice cold. They do not care about you. They definitely don't care about you if you're elderly. They don't care if you're a spiritual man. They don't care if you have a conscience. They don't care if you have integrity. They want you to be a company man. And to that, I have to read what a company man is, because this is really interesting. So in the dictionary, it says, a company man is an employee whose allegiance to his employer comes before personal beliefs or loyalty to fellow workers. So take that and like apply it to Watchtower. It's a brother whose allegiance to Watchtower comes before personal beliefs or his loyalty to his fellow brothers. Oh my God. Or to his conscience. Crazy. And that's kind of sickening, really. And that's really what we're dealing with. This is where this cognitive dissonance comes from all the time. When you see people so uncaring and ice cold, cutthroat. They're cutthroat. And so the letter that had come back from Bethel basically said that my grandpa was now being deleted as a ministerial servant. And for we know you feel sad, so please read this Watchtower. And my grandpa, like the injustice that he must have felt, and he did feel, because you could see in the letters that he replied, he he started writing to Bethel. He really was like, okay, here's all the watchtowers that you wrote about why we shouldn't do military service, why we shouldn't work for the church. And here's all the watchtowers that you have taught us. And there was no more replies. There was no replies anymore. And then my grandpa, and it just makes me really sad to even see it, because he was desperate. He said, I have served loyally for 55 years. Why am I being treated this way? And how many times have we seen this happening to good people? I know so many elders that were like my favorite elders because they had a sense of justice, because they were kind, and they were being cut down by the organization. And why? Because they weren't company men. This is exactly why. Because they weren't loyal to the organization, but because they were loyal to their conscience and to what they felt was wrong or right. This is why. It now finally makes sense, because all these years, like decades, we were like so confused by this. Like, on one hand, you think this is the truth, but on the other hand, like, the truth treats us like crappier than crap. How is this possible? And at the end of the day, all of this was a moot point. It doesn't matter. It's so sad that you wasted your health. And my grandpa, at one point, he ended up being really sick afterwards. And no wonder he was really sick, because all this nonsense made him so sick. And it's just like, to think you could just walk away, and these dumb people that are so cruel don't even matter in your life. These rules and regulations don't matter.
So now these elders, they are out for him. And there was another elder who was really nice, who really agreed with all of this. And again, I do not think it's wrong to work for the armed forces at all anymore. This is J-dub thinking. And if you want to work for a church, that is whatever you want to do. I'm just saying that if you're a Jehovah's Witness, and you can do those things as a witness, but the rules don't apply to certain people. We all know that. And I would love to hear your stories in the comments about your experience with having to quit a job or having difficulties with these regimented rules with the army or with church, or the conflict there. Because the thing is this, if you make a rule, it's really just not a blanket statement. It doesn't, every individual question is so different. Every situation is so different. So there's a lot of conflicts that come up, conflicts of interest, So what happened then is it got so horrible for my grandpa and for the other elder. They were out to just take them down. They were out to get them basically. And the other elder, what they did is they found a minuscule reason to disfellowship his son. And I mean minuscule. This kid, he was a nice guy. And he went to get his car fixed. And the mechanic was an old buddy of his who was disfellowshipped. And basically because he had a conversation with him and he was disfellowshipped at the time, they disfellowshipped the elder son. That was the reason they pulled, just to be able to remove the dad. The minute they disfellowshipped the kid, they said the dad can no longer be an elder. Disgusting. And with the other elder, his son, they'd actually been trying to get to the dad through disfellowshipping the son. And in an elders meeting that my grandpa attended, they called the son Brother Teflon because nothing would stick to him. I mean, how cruel. And he was a kid. He was a teenager. Like, I'm sure he did some things, where he acted up and they just couldn't pin anything in on him. And finally they had something, and finally they were able to disfellowship him. And one of the letters that I still kept, my grandpa actually had written to Bethel that it was a witch hunt, that they were after the dad. And back then they still had, if you didn't pick up the phone on time, like the answering machine would go on and record. So it recorded the conversation where they said to the brother, to this other brother, your son was just disfellowshipped and you're going to be needing to come in because basically this is the time you're going to be removed. And it just sucked. So over the years, for my grandpa, he kept writing to Bethel. He wrote to Patterson. He wrote to Brooklyn. In this new congregation he was in, he found out they're friends with all the people that he had to deal with in the other congregation. And, also, whenever you move congregations, there's a letter that's being written about you. And so this letter followed my grandpa around from hall to hall. And in this letter, if the elder doesn't like you, they'll write bad about you. If he likes you, maybe you'll get a good letter. But this letter will never go away. It will go in your file. You see those file cabinets at the back of the Kingdom Hall? Probably a bunch of pedophile reports in there and a bunch of disfellowshipping. Your personal business is in that file cabinet. And this letter followed my grandpa around from hall to hall for years. And he just did not understand what was happening to him. And for me, looking at all of this as a person who woke up and realizes it's a cult, I so wish that this was the time that my grandpa would have walked away, because he was so hurt. He felt like he gave his life and his reputation was ruined for what? For standing up. Aren't we taught to stand up for what's right? And he would write in these letters to Bethel, like, the faithful and discreet taught us these things, and now we're acting on them, and I don't understand why I'm being punished. Another thing that I forgot about in reading Grandpa's letters is that my uncle, Lisa's, my aunt studied with Lisa, so my aunt's husband also got removed as a ministerial servant during all of this. Like, for what reason? Just for speaking out? There was a bunch of crap that was happening, and they were appalled. And it's this cognitive dissonance because you believe it's the truth, so it should be just and like Jesus and kind. But in reality, you're seeing they're cruel. They're not baptizing your studies because they want them to have a ruined wedding. They're removing your husband as a ministerial servant because you're speaking out. They're removing Grandpa as an elder. And my elders, like my grandpa said, on what basis are you removing me? They will not even tell me the reason why they think I should be removed. They would not show him the card, like his publisher card with the letter that travels. And he kept writing to Bethel, and I do not understand why you're not replying to me. There's no word from Bethel. I have been a faithful servant for 55 years. Like, he had moved mountains for this organization that abused him. And another thing, like, to think, okay, like, how come these people don't realize this? How come they don't wake up? Well, it's also a trauma bond you're in. You're in a spiritual trauma bond with your religion. This is abuse. This was totally abuse. He was shattered. And yet you can't walk away because it is a trauma bond, and you don't recognize that till you get educated about it. And I think that Grandpa, toward the end of his life, he realized, like, this is all BS. Because he'd gone through so many things that were like this. And where was the justice in any of this? And I do think, like, what a waste of time all of this was. All this heartache, all this drama, for what? It was so pointless. It was so stupid. My grandpa should have been a professor at some university teaching. And I think that was part of the reason why he was so upset that he wasn't an elder anymore or a ministerial servant. It wasn't about that for him. I think he really loved to research and teach. I do. He should have been a professor at school. So for him, this was kind of like his special interest, like researching, and it was taken away from him. And even as an engineer and a surveyor, he would offer to do like the maps in the congregation and help them with the territory cards, and they would not let him. And one day he said, I'm blacklisted. Anything I do, I can't fix my reputation, and I don't even know what I did. And I feel like had I been disfellowshipped, I could have just come back and then be welcomed with open arms. But for me, I'm just forever like the bad guy now. And one of the elders in this new congregation that they had moved to, he said to my grandpa, let me tell you something. Your problem is not with the body of elders. Your problem is with Bethel directly. And my grandpa was like shocked, but he didn't even know what to do. So maybe there was correspondence there, who knows? But my grandpa's like, I'm so confused. And it was really James Patterson's book and reading about being a company man and how my grandpa didn't like go along with organizational rules, but always kind of followed the Bible, and they just did not want him there. And James Patterson talks about how the organization doesn't really want intelligent people in there. They don't want that because you use your head a little bit too much for them. I mean, no offense, but if you look at these governing body guys, they don't seem like the brightest people. They're poor speakers. I'm sorry, but it's just true. And I do think that there was a shift at some point with where they started just taking in certain people that were company men and that were not particularly kind. And I think that shift may have been with Ray France, because Ray France reminds me a lot of my grandpa. Just thinking deeply about these things and how they should be according to the Bible, and then seeing how they are in reality. Isn't that what it all boils down to? And then seeing the double standards. And so I think that after Ray France, who had a heart, they decided, oh, we're not going to use these kind of people in the governing body anymore. And they just keep getting, I'm sorry, but just worse and worse. Like, these guys, when you watch them, you're just like, I can't even believe this. Like, is this like the new governing body member? And my mom thought, this is who Jehovah picked to represent us. Like, even when we were in, we thought, this is so weird. So that is today's episode. If you have any questions, let me know, and have a good day.